latest episode of the Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. No, your eyes do not deceive you. I have not got the same t-shirt on from last week. I have indeed recorded 2 episodes on the same day. I have a tendency to do that. I mean, you know, I can do 8 whiskies, not a problem. Anyway, before we carry on with this episode of the show, I would like to bring your attention to this. The latest edition, I should say, of the Whiskey Magazine. Now, why am I going on about this edition of the Whiskey Magazine? As you can probably remember, the last edition of the magazine featured some of my tasting notes from the World Whiskey Awards. This episode, episodes on the brain. This edition, as if you turn to the regular new tastings on page 64, you will find my tasting notes in almost unedited state, completely unabridged. I mean, as you probably know, when they do the little tasting notes for the World Whiskey Awards, they are somewhat edited, and although Sophie does a really, really good job, you know, I have noticed on 1 or 2 of the tasting notes she's taken, shall we say, the best bits out of it, you know, and left the slightly uncomplimentary bits that she's used. But, you know, hell, well, you know, that's editors for you, I guess. But it's really, really nice to see, you know, pretty much my full tasting notes in the Whiskey Magazine, and you know, I'm really, really chuffed with it. And it's really interesting because Annabelle Meekley, I think I hope I pronounced your surname right, Annabelle. If you're watching this, was my co-taster, and we don't confer. We basically get the samples, we do the tasting, we score them. And it's only when they appear in here do I actually get to see how close I was. And by and large, we were pretty close in actual fact. I mean, there were 1 or 2 whiskies like the 40 Creek Heart of Gold, which Annabelle absolutely loved, and I just thought was, yeah. What was the other one? There was another one. If I can quickly find it, that. We didn't kind of disagree. Oh yes, it was the Koval Distillery, the 4 grain, which to me was big, fat and corny, and well, if there was 4 grains in it, it was a news to me, it has to be said, but Annabelle really, really liked it. Me, no, never been a fan of what the Koval Distillery does. All too young, too oily, too simple, but yeah, okay. We're kind of getting away from things here, but it was quite nice because I mean Annabelle is renowned for being, shall we say, a bit of a harsh scorer. So it was nice to see that my scores were, you know, there or thereabouts, maybe a little bit above what Annabelle was giving them. But anyway, you know, buy the latest copy of the magazine. Have a look at the tasting notes. I mean, or you can go onto the, you know, my blog or you know, the Gauntleys website to see my tasting notes. I mean, you probably have. You probably know what my tasting notes are like. But anyway, so that was that's basically that. Shall we talk about some whiskey? Okay. Right. This afternoon. This is the first of 3 parts. Yeah. There's a trilogy of tastings, no less, of Glenfiddich. You're probably going to go, bloody hell, he's going to do 3 tastings on Glenfiddich. Now, okay, Glenfiddich has a bit of a mixed rep, has to be said. A lot of people, should we say, once they've got into whiskey and have discovered whiskey, kind of see Glenfiddich as a bit of a, you know, it's a bit of an entry-level kind of thing. And, you know, it's not a bad thing. I mean, you know, a lot of people do start off on Glenfiddich, they start off on Glenmorangie. You know, it is a good entry-level whiskey to get you into what whiskey is all about. You know, generally speaking, they're relatively straightforward. And, you know, I think the quality is not too bad at all. You know, I mean, I don't stock them mainly because, you know, supermarkets with their buying power can buy them cheaper and sell them cheaper. You know, so from my point of view, it's purely commercial. You know, I can't sell them cheap enough, so there's no point in doing so. But I don't think they're bad whiskies. So, you know, these 4 samples all come from this year's World Whiskey Awards, and well, to be bluntly honest with you, certainly in the grand scheme of things, I mean, they entered enough bottlings. I mean, so I've got enough samples to do 3 episodes of the show. I mean, unbelievable, really, when you think about it. That Glenfiddich were just sort of like, one of the few of the big boys to sort of, really go for it and enter their whiskies. I mean, because I forget what the entry fee is, but it's obviously a price per entry, and it's not cheap to enter the World Whisky Awards. And Glenfiddich certainly entered an awful lot of bottlings. So, like I said, I've got enough ammunition, shall we say, for 3 episodes of the show. So, plus there was a few more as well, which got tasted and drunk a while ago. So, but anyway, I'll shut up waffling, shall I, and just let you know what I'll be tasting this afternoon. Right, okay, so like I said, I mean, I've got enough for three different tastings, so we're going to kind of start at the beginning. We will start with the Glenfiddich 12. Like I say, a lot of people will come into whiskey after, and this will be one of the first whiskies they buy, so it will be interesting to see. I've not tasted Glenfiddich 12-year-old in absolutely donkey's years, so it will be nice to see where it's at. Glenfiddich 15-year-old, bottle of 40%, that will be our second one. Thirdly, we will be looking at a distillery only edition of the 15-year-old, which is bottled at I believe 58.1%, so that should be interesting. And finally we'll be looking at the 18-year-old, I think the Solera Reserve, I believe, but so this is kind of like the kind of entry point of the Glenfiddich range. In later episodes of the show, I'll be looking at some of the more the older expressions. I've certainly got a sample of the 30-year-old, which won't give the game away and tell you what I think about that one until we get there. So unfortunately, they didn't enter the 40-year-old, which is a damn shame, which is just stunning stuff, it has to be said, which I tasted a number of years ago. But I think we've got enough to crack on with, so let's crack on with the 12-year-old then. Right, okay, 12-year-old, let's see what the nose gives us. It's actually not a bad nose. It's obviously a vatting of American oak and sherry. It's got some nice barley character, some nice crisp fruit, some dried fruit, some richness from the sherry, a little bit of dustiness. No, I mean it actually seems a lot older than 12. It has to be said. Yeah, a bit of spice, some fruit. Yeah, I mean it's not a bad place to start when you think about it. I mean, yeah, I can't fault it. I mean, it's nice whiskey. Quite a mouthful in actual fact, yeah. A lot of the rich, dark, slight treacly sherried fruits, some crisp, minerally apricot, bit of American oak. It's a little bit short, it has to be said, but it's a pleasant enough whiskey. It's fine. It's a sort of easygoing kind of sipping whiskey. It's well made. It's quite classy. Like I say, it's not the most complex of whiskies that I've come across, but it's certainly not too shabby at all. So yeah, good starter. Right, okay, so on to the 15-year-old, which in actual fact is a Solera Reserve rather than the 18-year-old, like I said earlier. So apologies for getting that one wrong. So Let's see what the nose gives us on this. A lot more sherry, obviously. More complex than the 12-year-old. Some nice kind of fruit cakey dried fruits. A little bit of perfume, a little bit of violets. Again, it has that crisp Glenfidddich character, that sort of granity kind of character to it, which has just that lovely freshness to it. Nice depth to it, nice richness. I mean, you could argue that it's so-so. It's kind of, you could say it's kind of whiskey by numbers to a certain extent. I mean, certainly when you think about the distillery, I mean, it's a big distillery. I mean, it pumps out, what, 10, 12 million litres of the stuff a year. It's got, you know, God knows how many stills. It's kind of almost, you know, ubiquitous when it comes to thinking about whiskey. But in actual fact, you know, the quality of what's in the glass is actually pretty damn good. A little bit of violety character coming through now. A nice kind of grainy sherry character. A little bit of herbalness. Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice nose, palate. Soft, malty, rich, treacly, broad, full. I mean, you can argue that it's maybe a little bit homogenous. It's a bit. There's no real sort of like high points. There's no real sort of spices kicking off. There's no. It's a nice whiskey. You know, it's. And I mean that in a good term. I don't mean that in a sort of derogatory sort of. It's a nice whiskey. It is a pleasant whiskey. It's rounded, it's soft, it's full, there's a lot of sherry character, it's got a nice sweetness again, balanced by that crisp Glenfidddich character. Like I said, really quite malty, full, pleasant. You know, it is not a bad whiskey at all, I don't think. Right, okay, and on to the 15-year-old at cask strength. Like I said, 58.1. I think this is a distillery only bottling, although I think it's probably more widely available now, but excuse me. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. That is actually lovely. That is really, really nice. Again, you know, some lovely rich sherried fruit. But more of that classic. I mean, I know Glenfiddich is a Speyside whiskey, but it has more of a Highland kind of character to me, a more edgy, granity kind of character, and this really has a lot of it. It's more about the character of the spirit than it is about the actual cask. Yeah, some nice sherried moments, a bit of violet. Some dusty spice. I mean, I think, if memory serves me correct, that this was best 13 to 20-year-old malt in the World Whisky Awards, and I certainly remember tasting this early in round one when I did Speyside and thinking, you know, this was actually very, very good. As you know, it was all done blind, and I really rated this because this has, to me, a lovely balance. Like I said, it's more emphasis on the citrus, granity, distillery character than there is on the oak, but the sherry cask is certainly adding a lovely richness, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of dusty spiciness. But it's, like I said, it's more about the spirit character, and it's like, yeah. That is really very, very, very good. It has to be said. Power. Mm, mm. That extra alcohol gives it a real kick. Um, wow, really fresh. I mean, it's just like, whoa, it's exploding on the taste buds, it has to be said, with all that granity barley character, which kind of like just goes whoosh into the sherry. I mean, it opens up with the sherry to a certain extent, with the dried fruits, the sort of soft, raisinated, toffeed, chocolate-coated raisins and all that kind of stuff. But it hits the middle and it's like, whoa, it all comes pounding through, and the finish is just like really intense, really granity, really hard, fresh. Wow, that's good stuff. It has to be said. I mean, ignoring the fact that, what you may well think about Glenfiddich, that's just good whiskey. At the end of the day, the thing is, certainly when I taste whiskey, I don't think about where it comes from. I don't think about the distillery's reputation. Maybe sometimes when they have not such a great reputation, and I'm sort of thinking, is this going to be a good whiskey, or is this going to be just like what they normally do? And at the end of the day, all you can do is just evaluate what is in the bottle, what is in the glass, and you just have to ignore all the frippery, all the sort of hype, all the kind of hoo-ha, reputation, all that kind of stuff. You just ignore it, because it's meaningless at the end of the day, because all that really matters is the liquid in the glass. And all I can say is the liquid in this glass, this 15-year-old, is bloody good. Really, really nice. So, yeah, great bottle. Right, and finally the 18-year-old. I think this is called the Ancient Reserve or something like that. Probably should have done my homework before shooting this episode of the show, but I never do that. Always kind of wing it and see what kind of happens. So anyway, let's see what the nose gives us. Oilier. Obviously, it smells slightly older than the 15-year-old, which you should hope, I suppose. It's got a sort of lanolin, kind of waxy, beeswax kind of character. Again, there's some dried fruit, some earthiness, a little bit of perfume. Again, it's a nice whiskey. It's got some nice dusty spice. Quite a pleasant dried fruit character. Still, no getting away from that granity kind of crisp Fiddick character. It's got a nice edginess. I mean, again, if I could get this little lot at a cheaper price than what I can do, and punt it out cheap, at, same sort of kind of prices that supermarkets charge, which I can't, frankly, I'd stock it. But I think the only Fiddick we do is the 21-year-old, which I will taste in probably the next episode of the show. It's good spirit. They may well churn out millions and millions of litres of the stuff, and it may well be a huge company and a behemoth as far as kind of all the marketing hype and all that kind of stuff goes. But the spirit is good. It's got a nice. I mean, it's got a nice character. It's probably, again, maybe not the most complex of spirits. And I know probably there are a lot of people who will argue that point with me, but I don't think it's. I think it's a lovely spirit, but at the end of the day, it's not sort of mega complex. I mean, the 15-year-old is absolutely, but the 18 is, it's good. It's an 18-year-old whiskey. It's an 18-year-old sort of vatting of American oak and sherry cask. It's like, it's good. Palate. Very mellow, quite toffeed, chocolatey, oily, a little bit of mentholated herbalness to it. Rich, soft, dried fruit, full, easygoing. Maybe not quite so much of the granity character as in the previous bottlings, but there's certainly got a bit of freshness, a bit of life to it. Heavier on the sherry dried fruits, but again, you know, not a bad whiskey. It's not the most complex malt on the face of the planet. It's not the most complex of 18-year-olds, it has to be said, but you know, it's again, you know, not bad. It's pleasant. Right, okay, so let's sum this little tasting up. So the entry level of Glenfiddich, should we say, for want of another word, the 12-year-old. I mean, yeah, pleasant. It's kind of, you know, fresh. It's probably a little bit more American oak than sherry cask. It's got a nice kind of character. It's straightforward. It's you know, I wouldn't quite go as far as saying it's entry level, but it's often viewed that kind of way, and it's certainly a good way to get into whiskey, because there's no harshness to it. There's no weird characters, no weird flavours. It's like I said, almost whiskey by numbers to a certain extent. But you know, the quality is pretty good. 15-year-old, yeah. I mean, again, I think you could say it's pretty much like the 12-year-old again. Whiskey by numbers, you know, it ticks all the right boxes. There's nothing sort of, you know, unexpected, shall we say. It's, dare I say it, a bit of a safe choice, but you know, it's not exactly a poor quality safe choice, it has to be said. The 15-year-old Distillery edition, and I think this really kind of shows that the spirit that Glenfiddich produced is pretty damn good. I mean, this is classy stuff. It's got intensity, it's got character, got more complexity. Maybe that's down to the additional alcohol. The extra alcohol has just kind of obviously added, you know, an intensity to the flavours, certainly. And it kind of stands out. It stands out sort of way above. Maybe it's because these are bottled at 40%. Maybe it's kind of, you know, that's what, I don't know. It's maybe that's the safe choice. You know, maybe that's sort of like, you know, we're not going to sort of go too weird and wonderful. We're not going to do 46%. We don't want too much alcohol, and because again, a lot of it is all to do, certainly with the Glenfiddich 12-year-old, is certainly to do with price points. And if you're going to bottle at 46%, then obviously that's going to put your cost price up, which then means that the retail price goes up, which means you lose, you know, market share to other whiskies, which they obviously don't want to do. So, but you know, I think if you're going to sort of look at Glenfiddich, then the 15-year-old at cask strength is certainly the one to do so. 18-year-old, again, I think it's exactly the same as the 12 and the 15-year-old. It's not bad whiskey. It's not the most complex of whiskey, but it's good whiskey. It's pleasant. It's easygoing. You could argue that sort of, you know, that there are more complex whiskies of those age statements out there, but equally so you can say that there's worse whiskies of those age statements out there. So you know, you can't have it kind of both ways. So. But for me, did they just lack a certain excitement? And you know, I guess that you can sort of like that say that they are a safe bet. They're you know, you kind of know what you're going to get on the tin. Certainly when it comes to some of the older age statements, like the 21 and 30-year-old, the 40-year-old, you know, they are certainly, you know, getting into a new stratosphere as far as complexity and interest goes. But you know, looking at these, you know, I think you can basically say that Glenfiddich is, you know, it's a good quality malt, and you know, I think everything needs an entry level at the end of the day. Whether it's whiskey, whether it's wine, whether it's beer, whether it's cars, whether it's clothes, I suppose, I don't know. You know, everything needs an entry level. Everything needs something to start at. and then probably move onwards from. And there's nothing wrong with being an entry level whiskey or an entry level anything really at the end of the day, because it's where you start to a certain extent, and that's, you're always going to get people coming into whiskey that are going to want to sort of like start off on a safer route and see what whiskey is all about, because whiskey is not an easy thing to get at the end of the day. If you've never drunk whiskey before, or maybe you've just drunk some of the cheaper blended whiskies, then it is a big jump to then get into the single malts, and then sort of where do you start? People say start with the Islers, get in with Ardbeg or Colilla or something like that, but that's kind of scary things. They are very, very distinctive whiskies, and things like Glenfiddich, Glenmorangie, those kind of whiskies are a safe style, and once you've kind of like tasted them, you go, oh, okay, this is what whiskies are about, this is what the flavours are about, this is what sherry cask does, yeah. And then you can move on and discover some of the more esoteric stuff, the more weird and wonderful things, but like I said, you've got to kind of start somewhere. So anyway, I think that's enough waffling for this episode of the show. I've probably drunk too much, which is why I'm waffling profusely. So all that's left to say is get your 18-year-old Distillery edition, because that is bloody good. And good dramming, and good afternoon.
Shattered memory that fades to the side. The pictures of the